Hi, folks. Steve Urban here. Today's episode of the Riderflex podcast is sponsored by Marketing 360. My good friend JB Kellogg and his team do such a fantastic job for us and so many other companies. Marketing 360 is the number one platform for small business, and it's everything you need to grow your business. If you need marketing support, I really encourage you to contact them at marketing360.com/Riderflex, and we'll add that link to the description of this episode for easy reference. On today's episode of the Riderflex podcast, we have guest Kurosh Hashemi, the founder and CEO of RoadGoat. It's a location technology platform. Map where you've traveled, see where your friends are going, and get personalized recommendations for where to travel next. Learn more about them at roadgoat.com. So, Kurosh, thanks so much for being on the Riderflex podcast. I appreciate you calling in today.
Thanks to you as well, Steve.
How are things in Brooklyn, New York?
These days it's a little bit cold here, but not as cold as other years. So we're managing to hang on.
Is that where you're from? Did you grow up there, New York?
No, I actually grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in Maryland.
You did? Okay. All right. Well, before we get into RoadGoat and all of the cool stuff that you're doing, give us a little personal history if you don't mind. Yeah, talk to us. Family, school, where you went to grow up. Give us some of that stuff.
Yeah, sure. So as I said, I grew up outside of D.C. area. My mother was a diplomat with the Embassy of Spain. So my mother is Spanish and my father is Iranian. So kind of grew up in this very international household.
Okay.
Didn't really start learning English until after I learned Spanish and Farsi. I lost Farsi at this point. But, actually kind of fast forwarding to my career, one of the big inspirations in my life was my parents and their cultures and being able to learn a lot from them about different places.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, so from high school, I actually, I wanted to go see the world. So I went to California.
Okay.
For college. I went to Pitzer College, a small liberal arts school there.
I saw that. How did you select that specific school?
I actually spent my first year at University of Southern California, which was this huge school. And then I realized that I went, to too big of a school. And then I decided I wanted to go to a really small school. And Pitzer was, this really vibrant kind of creative hub, still in Los Angeles. And so it seemed like a great fit.
Okay. All right. So you moved over there, after the first semester?
After the first year, yeah.
After the first year? Okay, great. So you go there, you have a good time at that school, and you decide to major in media studies.
Yeah, I was kind of bouncing around. I mean, I think between all my years in college, I at one point was a geography major, at one point was an econ major, and finished off as media studies. And now kind of looking at what we're doing at RoadGoat is really kind of a mix of the three of them, funny enough.
Interesting. Okay, so let's talk about, so you graduate. Now, did you have an entrepreneurial bug early on? Did you know you were going to try to start your own thing, or that wasn't even in your head in school?
Yeah. So actually, funny enough, I funded a lot of my college through a company that had started during college, which was basically doing web design for a number of organizations in the area.
I see. Okay. All right. So you were a web design guy early on, and you had your own little LLC, like your own little entity right away?
Yeah, that's right.
I see. Okay.
Coastal Web Factory, I think was the name.
What was it?
Coastal Web Factory.
Really? All right. I like the name. Okay. Was it just you?
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Now, as you were doing that and you're moving through school, what were you thinking you were going to do with your career? Was there any, master plan at that point?
I think that what I was realizing in the media world, first of all, if you go into the movie industry, it's a very kind of slow grind. Right. And then, I was thinking about kind of the digital media world and having a lot of clients at the time. It was just like, I wanted to do something, I guess, a little bit bigger. And I really started to become more and more interested in business and how business works.
Okay.
So I basically took my media studies major and kind of parlayed it into an internship at Walt Disney Company. So I went over there and I was doing strategy and finance for about 6 months before I graduated. And that helped me jump into management consulting, which is where I really started my career.
And you worked for Accenture for what, almost 4 years?
Yeah, I want to say like 3 years, maybe.
Okay. Okay. Boy, you're really cutting your teeth there because did you travel a lot, I'm guessing, during that time?
Ironically I almost did not travel despite being a management consultant while I was there. My
Really?
client was
Really?
in town, and it was nice in that sense.
Okay. All right. Now, during that time, did you still have the other entity on the side? Were you doing any kind of side? Nope. Nope. You weren't.
No,
Okay.
but I mean, in terms of being entrepreneurial, I will say that I was really kind of working my way into a new field within the industry I was working in. So I was
Mm,
working in the energy industry, and at that time, it was just kind of the very beginning of a movement called smart grid, which is basically taking the Internet of Things movement, that the idea that we can connect anything to the internet, and
mhm.
applying it to industrial assets for utilities. So whether it's the meters, like making them smart meters, or it's referred to as smart grid, basically a lot of different assets in the utility grid,
Okay.
connecting them up with communications and making them a lot smarter. And
Mhm.
so I worked on and had a really nice role on basically the first full scale project of its kind in the industry. So it was kind of building something new. We were working with Silver Spring Networks, which was at the time like the hottest, coolest startup in the energy space. So I
Ah,
was very quickly kind of like moving into this direction.
I see. Yep. I can see how everything's kind of pointing. Okay. So you worked for a few other companies. Give us just the short version there. So you're kind of moving through your career. You got out of school. I think you graduated. I don't know what year. I don't know what year you graduated. Oh, 05 or something like that.
Yeah, 2005.
Okay. And so from '05 through, so for 10 years, basically, or no, longer than that, 10 or 13 years, you basically worked for several companies before you started RoadGoat. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. During business, so after Accenture, I decided to go back to business school, specifically to go to Berkeley because they had such a great entrepreneurial environment.
Mm-hmm.
While I was there, I was interning at a venture capital firm, so kind of seeing things from the other side, from the
Okay.
investor side.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up going to Phillips Lighting after business school, and specifically a Silicon Valley subsidiary called Lumileds, which was owned by Phillips Lighting. And I was working directly with the C-suite team there, basically starting a bunch of new businesses within a $1 billion company.
Okay. Okay. All right. You're still kind of touching startup, and the whole entrepreneurial thing is still super close during this time. Okay.
Yeah. So one of the projects that I had there, for example, was I convinced the CEO to give me $500,000 to start a new business unit for ultraviolet LEDs, which are like can be used in medical devices and entertainment lighting, and you name it. It just goes across so many industries, and that actually became the highest profit margin product within the company.
Wow.
At
Wow.
the time left.
So you were learning how to do sales and raise cash while you're an employee, because you're kind of asking for cash, almost like you're trying to do a little mini startup. Okay, love it.
Yeah, a lot easier in a big company because you've got a team already put together, you've got the resources and everything.
Right, right. Okay, why'd you leave there, Lumi Lids? Why'd you leave there and go to Signify?
So when my wife got into grad school out east in New York,
I see.
um, so we were looking for kind of a shift for both of us. And so Signify is actually the new name for Philips Lighting. They still use both names, which is a bit confusing.
I see.
Um, but
I see.
so basically, I went to the parent company, and I moved into their high tech innovation lab.
Okay.
And basically, it's a group of about 40 people, virtually all of them engineers. And I was really one of the only business people kind of leading, defining new business models with all this new technology coming in. Basically, we were there kind of experimenting with all these new technologies, Internet of Things, and
Mm-hmm.
new data structures and stuff like that, and basically testing these new business models in the market.
Okay, and you're becoming a product guy at that point. I mean, really, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Okay, and all right. Now, at some point, you tell your wife, you're like, hey, I'm gonna quit my job at Signify and I'm gonna start RoadGoat.
Yeah.
Is that talk to us about that transition? I'm curious how that went.
Well, pretty much my entire career, I was like, I was working with these devices that were internet connected devices that were, and you look at the data that all these devices create, and they're all location tagged. And so I really started to learn a lot about location based data and the market for it when I was at Philips. And so, at the side of my head, I thought, wait a second, all this location data kind of tells a really interesting story, both about the people, the data the people that data is connected to, but also the places. So what type of people are going to that place? What sort of interactions are they having in that place?
Okay.
You can look at a person's data and get a sense of who they are. And hopefully in a non-creepy way, but I just thought, the very, very interesting side of that hasn't been tapped into. The other thing is that we have all these, as a person, we have accounts on all these different websites. We've got our social media, we've got our Fitbits, we've got, data kind of harnessed in all these places. And the idea for me was to, it was a hypothesis, can we aggregate all this data and tell one story with what, the location data in there has for us? And so I started experimenting kind of on the side of Philips about, bringing all my data in from Facebook, Instagram, Fitbit, and all these other locations, and basically creating one profile with that.
And are you experimenting because you're just curious and you like to build products and you like to do things, or are you thinking, I want to build a company?
I wasn't thinking that originally with it.
Okay.
It was more kind of learning.
Okay.
I shared that out with some people, and people started getting really into kind of like creating this history of where they've been. And suddenly, it became apparent like how powerful this could be.
Okay.
After just kind of sharing it with a couple hundred people, what we started to see is that very quickly we were able to identify the coolest places to go all over the world, just based on where people's histories. So it was unearthing like a lot of like, what's the coolest towns to go to in Vermont or Massachusetts or France.
When you're sharing and you're getting friends to kind of buy into this, did you already form the entity at that point? Was it a company yet, or it's still just kind of a project?
That's kind of the turning point was right there. So that once we got enough people on and saw that this was like interesting, then okay, this can go like a lot of places from here.
And were you sharing it like you were sharing it through social media, and you had kind of a social media buy-in or a social media following, and you're thinking, okay, I got enough people interested?
No, it was just kind of through a private network and
Wow.
just testing like how people were using it and talking to friends about it and people wanting to get in on using it.
Okay.
So it kind of grew from there, and then we decided to turn it into a company.
Who's we? Who's we?
There were a couple engineers that I was kind of like working with on this to build it out at first.
How were you? Do you mind me asking? How were you paying these engineers? Were they just kind of doing it for an exchange of equity, or you were personally bootstrapping the funds and paying these engineers? How were you doing that?
Yeah, so it started off of bootstrapping. So they were, I kind of like connected with them online, and we were kind of experimenting with some of this stuff. And then we decided it's time to build the MVP based on like what we had seen.
Okay.
And just to kind of take a step back, I mean, like what I really saw, the reason that got me going on this is that we don't really have anywhere on the web that tells a story about what a place is. Like if you think of a place as a person, something that has a personality, that attracts certain types of crowds and things like that. We have that for restaurants. So, we have like Google Places, we have Yelp, TripAdvisor. These are all like great for like identifying small businesses that are places that you would want to go. But when it comes to cities and towns and regions and countries, there's no one that's really kind of creating a data to illustrate what this place is all about.
Wow. Nobody. Okay. All right.
And we thought we saw very early that the data is starting to tell really strong stories about these places. And if we open that data up to our users to even like give us, tell us, okay, this is like, a great place, a great city for nightlife. This is a great like foodie destination. This is a college town.
Mm-hmm.
Those sorts of labels can not only be useful on our own platform as a B2C platform, but actually the rest of the travel industry is really missing a lot of this contextual information.
Wow.
That would help them, convert their users to be more engaged.
When you guys were looking, I'm sure you tried to find a competitor. I'm sure you're looking around thinking, surely somebody else is doing this. And the more study you did, you're like, wow, nobody's really doing this.
Yeah, it was really weird. And then like, funny enough, we were actually in contact with another company that did something similar. And we we're going to actually pay them to access some of their data to put on our site. And we started testing it, and before long, we realized that the quality of that data and the depth of it was just not good enough to even put on our site. And this is actually like a big name company. I don't want to say the name here.
Okay.
But the end of the conversation actually turned the other way. So instead of us, taking their data and putting on our site, we're now having conversations about supplying them with our data to make their information more useful.
How about that? Well, okay, great. So you saw a need. Nobody else is really doing it. You get this going with these developers. Now, at some point, you decide to leave your full-time paying job and dive all in, right? At some point, you had to do that.
Yeah.
Were you producing revenue yet from this new company when you did that, or you dove in before revenue started hitting? I'm just curious.
No, before revenue. In fact, we are before revenue right now. We're just launching the B2B side of the business.
Okay.
So the first step was establishing a platform that could basically harness a lot of really interesting data about places.
Okay.
Now we have that built, and now we can open that up to the rest of the world.
Wow. So you're still pre-revenue, but you've been doing this now for a year. When did you leave your full-time gig? A year ago?
Yeah, about a year ago.
Woo. How'd that go over with the wife when you're like, hey, listen, I'm not going to make any money for a year?
It was a tough conversation, but she's super supportive of all of it. I caught a couple of lucky breaks earlier in my career. I mentioned some of the stuff that I started within Philips kind of took off well, and was able to save up enough to be able to
be able to eat and pay the bills.
Yeah. I mean, and I also thought about fundraising right away. And I just didn't think it was the right thing to do, given I had the flexibility to not do it.
Agreed. Oh, no, I agree. So you haven't taken on any seed money or any friends or family rounds or anything. It's all yours, bootstrapped.
Yeah. We're going to be raising seed money now with the launch of the kind of B2B side of the business, but before that, no.
Okay. All right. And are you still using the same developers too? Are they still part of the team, or you've gone through a few? I'm just curious.
It definitely was like a process, kind of like settling into the right team. No, we had like a good group of guys that we started with, but they were very kind of like on the junior side. And so the product kind of like reflected that initially.
Okay.
And now we've really got a great team put together right now with some real tech experts and kind of getting us prepared for the post-funding like big growth.
And so I just want to, if you don't mind, I really want to just dive in there just a little bit, because I think a lot of our listeners now, they're tapping into the Riderflex podcast because they're curious about your company, sure, but they also are entrepreneurs and they have their own ideas, and they're always like, okay, well, how'd you do that? Like, how'd you bridge that gap from job to this? And then did you bootstrap it? Did you pay those developers? Did you have to give them equity? Like, how'd you structure that? How'd you survive? And so that's why I ask a lot of questions, because right in here, right at this stage where you're at, is where I think a lot of people, that they're scared right there, right? Or they only have so much money saved up, right? There's only, they can only go so far. So right in here is where everybody kind of gets either scared or changes their mind or goes back and gets a job.
Yeah.
And so were you creative when you're calling these developers, you're like, hey man, I got this really cool idea, but I can't really pay anything, but come help me. Like how I'm just curious how that conversation went.
I think you bring up a really good point. I think that is probably the hardest thing in terms of like starting all of this. And like, I think on that front, like, for people who are pretty early, like pretty young, you may think that you want to go into the business side, but if you're working with tech, I would say like it does not hurt to actually like do your education in engineering. It doesn't mean that that's what you have to do the rest of your life, but it gives you the flexibility to sort of like quasi start stuff without having to rely on other people. In my case, I spent a lot of time kind of self-learning a lot of the basic web stuff. As I told you, I did some of it in college a long time ago. It's completely different now. But I spent a lot of time being able to do that, so I'm not so reliant on other people, first of all.
You could kind of like, in your case now, like if you hired a developer, you could know yourself whether or not he was any good, probably pretty quick at this point.
As long as it's like the front end design stuff, the back end stuff is a lot more.
Gotcha. Okay.
Over my head.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that's a good point. I've talked to a few entrepreneurs that aren't developers or tech guys, and but they're trying to start a tech company, and that is hard to do. Trying to be a founder of a tech company and not being a former developer of some kind is tough.
Yeah. And, I think it's very cliche to say, but invest the time in finding the great people. It just,
Mm.
I've even seen it on your other podcasts. Other people say the same thing. And like, I
Yes.
can't stress that enough. If you don't do that up front, you're going to end up paying for it really bad.
Isn't that the truth?
Once you find good people, it just completely changes the course of the company.
And now you're about to. So now you're at this point where you're like, hey, I think we're ready to do a friends and family round, so to speak, or seed round, whatever you're going to call it. Are you ready to give now? I'm assuming you have almost all the equity at this point. Are you ready to hand out equity? Or are you doing this on a convertible note? What are you planning on doing? I'm just curious. Can you share any of that? Can you share any of that?
Yeah, I mean, we plan to raise a convertible note probably around 400K.
Okay.
I would like to build a tech center out in Barcelona, Spain. My mother lives there. I've got a lot of connections there, and
cool.
It's just a super vibrant place with people from all over the world there. It's also obviously a lot more affordable than New York.
I
So
see.
that's kind of like the vision of kind of like how to build the tech team.
When you quit your job and you started this RoadGoat, what'd your parents say? I'm curious how that conversation went.
A lot of like awkward questions for sure.
they're like, what's it going to be called? And you're like, RoadGoat. And I could just hear your dad going, what? What do you mean?
And like, what do you mean you're not gonna like make money off of it? Right? for what? For like a few weeks, or what do you mean?
Right. Oh, it's so funny. I remember I still remember the day I had that conversation with my wife when I said, listen, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go all in on Riderflex. And I still remember her saying, okay, well, how much money are we going to make next year? And I said, I have no idea. Those are always fun, scary, exciting conversations, aren't they?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
Definitely.
Okay. All right. So okay. So now when do you think you'll start? When are you going to be revenue? When is it going to be out there to the market where people can, start paying you? When is that? What's the timeline on that?
We should be hitting revenue by the middle of 2020. So
okay.
It's going to take a few months to fundraise, and at the same time, we're going to be building the B2B product. Then we have to get basically sales out there to give big travel companies this data so that they can interact with it. So
is that your target customer, travel companies?
Yeah, primarily big travel sites that can use more contextual information about different locations to help their own users.
And there's not going to be a B2C platform in this deal?
There is. So that's what that's what the last year is the B2C platform.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. So kind of the way it works is we have our B2C platform and people are telling us all this interesting information about places. And then we're augmenting that data with some data science that we do about places. And we package that into like one database that now we can hand over to the travel industry and say like, hey, by the way, this like hotel that you're booking is, this one is in the like town that's like for people, partying in their 20s, and this one's like the family town, and this hotel is in a not so safe town, so you might want to like double.
I see. Okay, so I get it now. Sorry, I was lost on that at first, but I see. So the B2C basically has been this platform to gather all this information that then is packaged up in this nice present that you're going to sell B2B. That's it. That's the short layman's terms version.
Yeah, we have over about 60,000 users right now on the B2C platform.
Okay, will you ever charge the consumer for anything? Will there, $1.99 to download or something or anything like that?
That's not the intention.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious. Okay. And are you hoping that you get acquired at some point that, I don't know, whoever like comes along and writes you a big check? Is that the plan?
Maybe. I mean, it's not about the big check as much as it's like, really want to use this platform to kind of change the way that people travel. We really kind of like unearthed a lot of really interesting places that people didn't know about. Everyone kind of knows the big cities that are really attractive to go to. But as people get more aware of kind of different places to travel for weekends, kind of nice rural towns and things like that, that's where we can kind of like unearth a lot of really interesting data.
Yeah.
And I hope that, if we have the opportunity to be acquired one day, that it would be with a company that really wants to do something powerful with that.
You are passionate about it. I can tell. It's for you. It's not just about this, though. I'm not just trying to get rich. Like, no, I'm a product guy. I'm super fascinated by it and I'm passionate about it. I like that. That's great. That's great. I think that's going to help you raise cash because the guys who write checks, guys and girls who write checks, they're going to be looking for that. You don't have any experience raising cash, do you?
No, not out, within a corporate setting, yes, but not outside of that.
You're gonna have to call me back. The first time you sat across the table at a dinner table from somebody and ask them for 500 grand. You're gonna have to tell me how that went.
A little anxious to see how it goes,
right?
But I hope well.
Yeah, I think you'll be fine because you're super authentic and you're genuine with your approach and you're all into the product. And I think a lot of that helps. So you're gonna have to you're gonna get all this experience raising cash. That's gonna be fun. Plus, you're learning how to be a CEO on the fly too, right? I mean, there was no training. There's no like, oh, here's the CEO handbook. You're learning as you go.
Yeah, definitely. If you're starting a startup, you have to be willing to learn a lot of things that like you never thought you would, I don't know, get involved with. So.
And do you have employees now?
They're contract employees. So I'm really looking forward to fundraising in part to have like a real team,
mm-hmm.
And real employees. And you kind of asked before about like equity structure. I definitely want this to be a team thing that everyone is,
Good.
All in on. And for sure that I think that is like a required part of getting people motivated.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I don't mind sharing that on the Riderflex podcast. If you look at our website, about half the people on there are equity holders. And quite frankly, when you're in your situation, sometimes you can't pay folks really what their market value is at first because cash flow is so tight and you're raising cash. So you have to be able to offer some kind of equity to entice them to come help you build it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's important for the listeners. That's a good tip for anybody listening to this particular episode. You want to gain talent on your startup team. Either you're going to have to pay them or you're going to have to give them an equity play. One of the two, right? It's got to be, or a little combination of both.
Yeah. I would think that most, you probably have to offer as much as you can on both sides to make people interested and driven.
Yep. Gotcha. No co-founders on this deal. It was your baby.
Yeah, that's a interesting topic. I mean, there's a lot out there about, you have to have a co-founder and this and that. I work in not a co-working, but a travel startup space in New York, Voyager HQ. And just am really kind of plugged into the entrepreneurial scene in New York. And at least from my experience, I mean, I've seen a lot of problems with the whole co-founder thing.
Mm-hmm.
When it works, it's a beautiful, amazing thing. But it has caused a lot of startups a lot of headache because if you're not ready for, I mean, that's a marriage. And if you're not ready to get married, then things will backfire. And then like, you can't even focus on the company because you're dealing with the drama and fallout of it.
You're absolutely right. And that is probably the most common reason for failure in a business is something happens with the personalities or the people. I mean, even if they have a decent product, they end up blowing each other up, with their personalities. It happens all the time. Or so do you wake up in the middle of the night at this point? Do you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning in a sweat yet, kind of walking around nervous, wondering, oh man, okay, so how much cash do I have left? Is that happening to you yet? Or you feeling pretty comfortable?
I think there's definitely some nights where you like wake up at 3 a.m. and you're just like thinking about everything. That happens probably pretty often. I think probably most entrepreneurs in the early stage kind of like getting stuff together. There's like so many things that you're thinking about and you're so excited, but you're also like nervous about things. So
is your wife nudging you? Is she like, hey, when are you going to start getting paid? Like, is she?
Where are you gonna go fundraise?
Does she have any experience raising cash, by the way?
She does not, no.
Okay. All right. But she sounds super supportive. That's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
No kids?
No, I think it's like too hard at this point in
I
life.
would, yeah, yes. Yeah, can you imagine your wife comes home tonight and you're like, hey, by the way, I know it's not making any money yet, but let's have a couple of kids.
The math
Oh,
doesn't
man.
work out. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Okay, let me ask you a couple of questions here just for advice for entrepreneurs as we enter into this kind of backside of this interview. So if there's somebody else out there that is trying to start a tech company, but they're not a developer, they maybe they were a finance major, or maybe their background was sales or whatever, but they're trying to start a tech company,
Yeah.
and they're young. What would you tell them now based on what you've learned so far? What kind of advice would you give them?
Um, for one, I'd say check out the no code community. It's blowing up right now. There's a ton of great, you know, platforms and tools out there. They're like very well VC funded companies that are doing this.
Hmm.
So go that route first. I mean, if you have the means to fund it for a while yourself, do it. Actually, one big piece of advice I would say before even doing that, you can create Google ads on an idea before the idea is even created. And you can basically look at what's the click-through rate of
Ooh.
how you're positioning an idea just to see like, are people interested enough? And it's a very cheap way to kind of test different hypotheses.
Wow, great tip. That's a really good tip. Yeah, I would combine that with start a Facebook page on the topic, start some social media on it, and see if you get a following. See if anybody gives a crap.
Yeah, exactly.
I've talked to several entrepreneurs on this podcast that actually started their businesses that way. To your point, they didn't even have a product, but they made it look like they had a product on social media, and they waited until people said, "Yeah, I want to buy that," and then they went and made the product.
Yeah, a lot of the most vibrant like communities, companies out there actually just started as a Facebook group that was like just like had a very great focus and very like committed people, and then they're
Yep.
like, okay, we can just make this into a website. So
Yes, yes. That's a great tip though that you gave. That's really good. Okay. I appreciate you sharing that. Okay. And now at this point, would you do anything differently? Would you, kind of looking back, because you had a nice career there for 10 years or so, right? It wasn't like you just got out of college and started a business. Would you do anything different now? Like, for example, do you wish you had started sooner, or is there anything you're looking back going, I would have done that differently at this point?
um, that's a great question. I think that I maybe would have done fundraising from the start instead of trying to prove that it works before going to
Really?
the fundraising.
Mm.
Um, just because the lack of funding can make it a little slower on the acceleration through the plans that you have.
Yeah, but now
Uh,
you got proof of concept kind of in place, and now it's going to be easy for you to raise. I think. I hope.
yeah, definitely. It definitely will be a lot easier now. And it also depends on the personality type. I think there's a certain type of person that can just like walk into a room and like make people fall in love with an idea. And if you're that type of person and you can, see that type of person, definitely go out there early to get the money to just get things going faster. But yeah, I mean, if you're able to hold out, there's benefits, of course. You already have a proof of concept. You have like more control over equity. You obviously can raise at a higher valuation once you've proven something. So there's a lot of benefits to also waiting, and also the lack of control from the VCs telling you every
Yeah.
little thing you need to do. So it's a lot of freedom to do it with not that way, but yeah, it depends. Which I think just me personally, I would have liked to like fly through that faster.
I think what I also heard you say, there's a little hidden message in there where you're saying, I've gone through a ton of savings cash and I wish I hadn't gone through so much. I don't know if that's accurate, but I hear that just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, definitely the personal financial risk is part of
Yes.
that too.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, no doubt. Hang on to the equity control as long as you can, my friend. I'm sure you've been told that a million times by a bunch of different people, right?
Yeah.
When people do start offering cash, what's interesting is you're about to enter that phase, right? You've been very product focused and you've gotten the product where it is. Now, all of a sudden, your world is going to be in this dance with, the friends and family round and the cash and the investments and the cap table management and all this stuff that's going to eat up time. And you're going to have to be careful that it doesn't take you completely away from the product. And there's going to be this balance that you're going to have to live pretty quick. I'm sure you know that.
Yeah, I foresee my job completely changing pretty soon here.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. But it'll be fun. It'll be super exciting. I mean, I'm happy for you. You know, I think it's a great idea. The fact that nobody else is doing it, and you already, by the way, is there any like patented, like, I don't know, protective, I mean, is there anything you can, keep secret, keep people from copying? I don't know. I have no idea.
We don't have any patents per se, but definitely the value of our company is our data, and we taken a lot of measures to make sure that that's guarded as carefully as we can.
Okay.
There's also people's personal information in there, and we have a very progressive kind of privacy policy, I think, compared to most of the tech companies, and hope to be one of the leaders in like changing how tech companies think about their users' data.
Okay. 2 more questions real quick. How'd you come up with the name RoadGoat?
Oh, this was like a several month process of just like writing down words that I liked that were associated with what I saw the company as, and just like trying every combination of them to see which .com was available. And I would say like probably like 2% of like all the combinations
Right.
I tried were available. And RoadGoat was the winner out of that. It actually, like, this was back when we just had kind of like 100 friends experimenting with it.
Yeah.
And we had everyone kind of vote on what the name was, and that's what everyone liked the best.
How did goat, though, when you were doing the word combos, where did goat come from?
I was just thinking of like, I wanted something that was like kind of funny and kooky. And
Okay.
so I just started thinking about like weird animals like llamas and goats, and like what's kind of like a funny mascot to have.
So road was going to be in there. You were trying to combine road or trip or travel or something with I see. I can almost imagine your list of and you're typing them into GoDaddy. Oh shit, that was not available. Right.
Basically doing that for a couple months until I found one.
Wow. Oh, that's okay. That's cool. All right. Last question really here is, right now for Kurosh, how do you define your core purpose in life right now as a human being? If you had to put that in a sentence.
Right now my focus is kind of like unraveling amazing information about places to discover in the world.
That's pretty good. I like that. And that ties right into your business. Did you practice that? Did you watch my previous interviews and practice that, or you came up with you pulled that?
I don't think I got to the last minute of the interview, so I missed that one.
Okay, that's good. No, I like that though. Okay, I think that is your core purpose, just listening to you and visiting with you. And by the way, I think your personality is great. I mean, you're not cocky at it, you're humble enough to where, and you're pleasant enough to where I think you're going to be fine raising cash. I think people are going to genuinely like you. I think you're a likable guy, and they're going to be like, oh, you know what? Not only is he smart, but he's kind of cool. I want to hang around him. I think I might want to give him money.
Thank you, Steve. I hope so.
I wish you guys the best of luck at RoadGoat. By the way, for all the listeners, it's roadgoat.com, right? Roadgoat.com.
That's right.
And they can go in, they can check out the website. Then they can go to your social media. I think you guys are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest.
That's right. Go out there, figure out, cool places to travel to next, weekend trips, long vacations, all sorts of things.
Awesome, sir. All right. Thanks for being on the Riderflex podcast. Great job. Hope to meet you in person soon. Maybe I'll come out to New York and we can go to dinner, or better yet, I can go over to Spain when you get the office set up.
Please do. We got a place for you there.
I'm going to hit stop on the recording, but hang tight just for a second before you hang up. Thank you, Kurosh. Appreciate it.
Thanks. It's been a pleasure.
The Riderflex podcast features entrepreneurs, business executives, and the stories behind how they got there, as well as daily tips on career advice and job interviews. Our show can be heard just about anywhere these days, but you can visit riderflex.com and click on the podcast page to hear all the previous episodes and learn more about the recruiting and consulting services we provide. Contact us at the email address info@riderflex.com or 888-964-5876. Thanks so much for listening, and if you enjoy our show, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like the episodes.